Do not skip this story. Imagine having nothing. No home, no food, no one to turn to, just a cold pavement beneath you and the dark sky above you. Now, picture this. You find a wallet on the street, a wallet filled with money, more than you've seen in your entire life. It's a billionaire's wallet, full of cash, credit cards, and IDs. And you're standing there, holding it in your hands. You know you could take it, keep it for yourself. Maybe even change your life with just one selfish decision. But instead, you do something different. You walk to the mansion of the person who lost it. You return it. And you don't ask for anything in return. That act of kindness, that simple decision, changes everything. For the billionaire, for you, for everyone, what happens next shocks everyone. The billionaire, seeing your honesty, does something that no one ever expected. Something that will change your life forever. This isn't just any story. This is a story about a homeless girl who chose kindness over greed. It's about how one decision can turn your entire world upside down. From nothing to everything. From hopeless to hopeful. From invisible to unforgettable. So grab a seat, because this story will break your heart. And it will heal it again. It will make you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the power of doing what's right. Don't blink, don't scroll. You won't want to miss what happens next. It was a cold morning on the corner of Fifth Avenue. Emily stood, her hands shoved deep in her threadbare coat pockets, her feet cold and sore from walking the streets all night long. She had no home to return to, no family to care for her, nothing but the cold pavement beneath her and the hustle of the city around her. The sounds of honking cars and hurried footsteps echoed in the distance, but none of it mattered to her. She was used to the noise, the chaos of life on the street. Emily glanced down at her shoes, worn down to the soles. A little girl she used to be would never have imagined she would end up like this, a homeless girl, without a future, without hope. She remembered a time when she had dreams of a life different from this one. But those dreams had faded long ago, replaced by the harsh reality of survival. Every day was a struggle to find food, to stay warm, to find a place to sleep. The streets were cruel and unforgiving, but they were all she knew now. She paused for a moment, looking around the busy city street, watching the people rush by in their nice clothes, their busy lives, their perfect worlds. But none of it mattered to her. She was invisible to them, just another face in the crowd. No one looked at her, no one cared about the girl standing on the corner, with the cold wind biting at her skin. As she was lost in thought, she noticed something shiny lie on the sidewalk ahead of her. At first, she wasn't sure what it was, but as she walked closer, she saw it clearly, a black leather wallet lying open on the ground. She bent down and picked up, her fingers trembling as she turned it over in her hands. It was a beautiful wallet, sleek and expensive looking. She could feel the weight in her hands, as if it was made of something far more valuable than just leather inside the wallet. She could see credit cards and a driver's license. There was also some cash folded neatly inside. She had never seen so much money in one place before. She could hardly believe her eyes. It was more than she had ever seen in her entire life. Her heart raced as she stared at the wallet in her hands. She knew she should just leave it there. What if someone was looking for it? What if the person who lost it was waiting for it to be returned? But at the same time, the temptation was strong. She could feel the weight of the money in her hands, the promise of food for the next few days, maybe even something nicer than the clothes she was wearing. Her mind raced with possibilities. Should she keep it? Could she take it for herself? No one would know, right? She could use the money to buy a warm meal, a new jacket, something to get her through the winter. She could even get herself a place to sleep for a night or two. It wasn't as if the wallet would be missed, was it? But then she thought about her mother. She remembered the lessons her mother had taught her when she was a child, the values of honesty, kindness, and doing the right thing no matter how hard it was. Her mother had always said that doing the right thing was more important than anything else, that even in the hardest times, it was important to stay true to yourself. Emily's hands shook as she thought about her mother. Her eyes welled up with tears. The memories of her mother were still fresh in her mind, even though it had been years since she had passed away. Her mother's voice echoed in her head, "Do what's right, even when no one is looking." Emily closed the wallet slowly. She didn't even have to think about it. She knew what she had to do. It wasn't hers to keep. She would return. She didn't know who would care about a homeless girl returning a billionaire's wallet. But she didn't care either. She couldn't take something that wasn't hers. She glanced around the street. and saw the address on the driver's license. It was a mansion not far from where she was standing. Her heart skipped a beat as she thought about walking into a place like that. The last time she had seen a mansion was when she was a little girl, and her family had taken her to visit the rich part of town. She had marveled at the giant houses and fancy cars, but that was a long time ago, a time she could barely remember now. But still she had to do it. She had to return the wallet. It was the right thing to do. With a deep breath, she tucked the wallet into her coat pocket and started walking. The journey was long. The street seemed endless, but she didn't mind. She kept walking, each step carrying her further away from the street corner and towards something she had never expected to see, a mansion far beyond her reach, but within her grasp now. As she walked, she wondered if the person who had lost the wallet would even care. Would they thank her? Would they even notice her standing there in her dirty clothes with nothing but a heart full of honesty? She wasn't sure, but she kept walking. The mansion appeared in front of her like a dream, a big white building with pillars and large windows. The gates were tall and imposing, and she hesitated for a moment, wondering if she belonged there at all. But she didn't stop. She rang the doorbell and waited. A few moments passed before the gate creaked open. A man stood there dressed sharply in a suit. He looked at her curiously, as if unsure why a homeless girl was standing at his doorstep. "Excuse me," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I believe this belongs to you." She held out the wallet, and the man stared at it for a moment before looking back at her, his expression unreadable. "Where did you find this?" he asked, his voice sounding a little surprised. "I found it on the street," Emily replied, "and I wanted to return it." The man looked at her for a moment longer, his gaze shifting between the wallet and her face, as if trying to figure out if this was some sort of trick. "Thank you," he said, finally, his tone softer now. "You could have kept it. You know, no one would have known." Emily shook her head. "I couldn't. It's not mine." The man nodded slowly and took the wallet from her hands. "You know, there's something about you," he said after a pause. "Something different." Emily blinked, unsure what he meant, but she smiled anyway and nodded. "It's just the right thing to do," she said quietly. The man stood there for a moment, deep in thought, before he spoke again. "Well, then come inside," he said. "I'd like to thank you properly for returning this." Emily felt a flutter in her chest as the gate opened wider. She didn't know what to expect, but she stepped inside anyway. The gate swung open wide, and Emily stepped into the garden, her shoes crunching on the gravel path. She could feel the eyes of the man following her, but she didn't look back. She kept her head down, unsure of what was to come next, as she walked along the path leading to the front door of the mansion. The mansion was more magnificent up close than she could have ever imagined. It had large columns at the entrance with intricate carvings, and the windows gleamed in the light of the afternoon sun. The flowers in the garden were carefully arranged, and the hedges were neatly trimmed. Everything about this place seemed perfect, too perfect for someone like her. But she didn't stop. She had come this far, and she wasn't turning back now. The man who had opened the gate was following behind her, now his footsteps light and quick. He cleared his throat as he caught up to her and spoke. "My name is Jonathan," he said. "Jonathan Williams, and you are—" Emily paused for a moment and turned to face him, her heart racing slightly. She had to speak, but the words seemed stuck in her throat. She wasn't used to talking to people like this, people who had everything, and she had nothing. "I'm Emily," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Emily Jackson." Jonathan nodded, as if he was trying to remember the name. He held the door open for her as they reached the front steps. "Well, Emily Jackson," he said, "welcome to my home." She stepped inside, and the warmth hit her like a wave. It was a strange feeling, the warmth of home, something she hadn't felt in so long. She looked around and saw a large chandelier hanging from the ceiling and paintings on the walls that looked as if they were worth more than she could ever imagine. There were soft rugs on the floor, and the furniture looked like it had been carefully selected. Everything about the house screamed wealth and luxury. But Emily didn't feel like she belonged there. She felt out of place in her worn-out clothes and messy hair. She wanted to leave, but she didn't know how to say it. Jonathan seemed to notice her discomfort. "Please make yourself comfortable," he said. "Can I offer you something to drink?" Emily hesitated, unsure how to respond, but her throat was dry from walking and talking so much. So she nodded. "Water, please," she said softly. Jonathan gestured toward the sitting area. "Right this way, then," he said, and Emily followed him into a room that had large windows overlooking the garden outside. He poured her a glass of water and handed it to her. Emily took it gratefully and drank it down in one gulp. The cool liquid felt like a blessing against the dryness in her throat. "Thank you," she said quietly, setting the glass down on the coffee table. Jonathan smiled again. "You're very welcome," he said. "And thank you again for returning the wallet." His expression softened slightly. "Most people would have kept it, you know." Emily shrugged. "I couldn't keep it," she said. "It's not mine." Jonathan sat down across from her and looked at her for a long moment, as if trying to figure out something about her. "You're different," he said. "Finally, most people wouldn't have thought twice about keeping that wallet." Emily looked down at her hands, unsure what to say to that. She didn't think she was anything special. She had just done what felt right. But she could tell that Jonathan was still studying her, trying to understand why she hadn't taken the money for herself. He leaned forward slightly, his voice lower. "Now, do you know who I am, Emily?" Emily shook her head. She wasn't sure why it mattered, but she didn't want to sound ignorant either. "I'm a businessman," Jonathan continued. "I run a large corporation. I have more money than I can ever spend." And yet he paused and looked at her with a slight frown. "It seems that I've lost touch with something very important." Emily didn't understand what he meant, but she stayed quiet, not wanting to interrupt. Jonathan continued, "I've been so focused on making money, building my empire, that I've forgotten what it means to be kind to others, what it means to do something selfless without expecting anything in return." He stood up and walked over to a window, staring out at the view of the garden, his back to Emily. "Thank you for reminding me of that," he said. "You're the kind of person I want to help." Emily didn't know what to say. She wasn't used to being treated like this. She had always been the one helping others when she could, but never expecting anything in return. Jonathan turned back to her and smiled. "You made me see something I've been missing," he said. "I want to do something for you, something that can change your life." Emily looked at him, unsure what he meant. "I don't need anything," she said quickly. "I just wanted to return the wallet." Jonathan waved his hand dismissively. I know," he said, "but you deserve more than just a thank you. You deserve a chance, a real chance at a better life." He walked over to a desk and pulled out a checkbook. "I want to help you, Emily," he said. "I'm going to give you a sum of money that will set you on the path to something better, and I'm going to offer you a job in my company. You'll be given a place to stay and everything you need." Emily stared at him wide-eyed, unsure if she was hearing him correctly. This man, who had everything, was offering her a job, a place to stay, and more money than she could even dream of. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Jonathan smiled again. "Because you reminded me that there's more to life than just money," he said. "You showed me that kindness still exists in the world, and I want to reward that." Emily sat there in shock. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had spent so many nights cold and hungry on the streets, and now here she was sitting in a mansion being offered everything she had ever dreamed of. "Why me?" she asked, still struggling to understand. "Because you're the kind of person the world needs more," Jonathan said, "and I think you have a lot of potential." Emily didn't know what to say. She was overwhelmed with emotion. Tears started to well up in her eyes. She had never expected anything like this to happen to her. She had never imagined that a simple act of kindness would change her life so completely. Jonathan placed the checkbook down and looked at her with kindness in his eyes. "Take your time," he said. "Think about it, but just know that this is real, and I want to help you." Emily nodded slowly, still trying to process everything that had just happened. She had gone from standing on a cold street corner with nothing to sitting in a mansion with everything she could ever need. For the first time in a long while, Emily felt hope stir inside her, and for the first time what felt like forever, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things would get better. The next morning, Emily woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside her window of the room. She was and felt warm and safe. She had never slept in a bed like this before, and for a moment, she wondered if it was all a dream. She looked around at the large room, the thick carpet on the floor, and the soft curtains hanging at the windows. It felt like she was in another world, a world so far removed from the cold streets she had known for so long. She sat up slowly, taking in her surroundings. She wasn't sure how to feel. Part of her was still in disbelief. Part of her couldn't understand how she had gone from standing on a street corner, holding a lost wallet, to waking up in a beautiful room in a mansion. She could still remember the look on Jonathan's face when it offered her the job, and the place to stay. It felt unreal, like something out of a fairy tale, but it was real. She had to remind herself it was real. She stood up and walked over to the window. She pulled the curtains aside and looked out at the view below. The garden stretched out before her with flowers in full bloom. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft golden light over the entire yard. The house was quiet and peaceful, and for a moment Emily allowed herself to relax. She took a deep breath and felt the weight of the world lift off her shoulders. It felt like a fresh start, new beginning, a chance to leave the past behind and build something better, something real. But even as she stood there looking out at the beauty of it all, she couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't belong here. This wasn't her world. This wasn't the life she had known all her life. She was just a girl from the streets, a girl who had nothing but the clothes on her back and the shoes on her feet. How could she fit into a world like this? How could she ever be enough? She sighed and turned away from the window, her thoughts racing. She knew she couldn't stay here forever. She knew that Jonathan was offering her a chance, but she couldn't shake the fear that one day she would mess it all up, that one day they would see her for what she really was, a girl who didn't belong in a place like this. But she couldn't give up on this opportunity. She couldn't throw away the chance to change her life. After a moment, she made her way to the small table where her bag was resting. She opened it and pulled out the wallet that had started all of this. It was still in her possession, even though she had returned the original wallet to Jonathan the night before. She couldn't bring herself to let it go. It was a symbol of everything that had changed her life, a symbol of the kindness that had been shown to her when she least expected it. She looked at the wallet for a long time, feeling the weight of it in her hands, as if it carried the weight of her future, the future. She had never dreamed possible the future she could have if she played her cards right. As she sat there lost and thought, the sound of footsteps came from the hallway, and the door to her room creaked open. Jonathan appeared in the doorway, his expression soft and kind. "Morning," he said with a smile. "I thought you might like some breakfast." Emily smiled back for the first time in what felt like forever. It felt good to smile. It felt good to feel safe. She nodded. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but grateful. Jonathan stepped into the room, carrying a tray with a bowl of fruit and some toast. "I figured you could use some energy after your long day yesterday," he said, setting the tray down on the table. Emily sat down and picked up the bowl of fruit. She hadn't eaten much the day before, but now she felt her stomach growl in hunger. She took a bite and smiled. The fruit was sweet and fresh, and for a moment, it felt like everything was right in the world. Jonathan sat down across from her and looked at her for a moment, as if studying her. He had a thoughtful look in his eyes, but Emily didn't mind. She had gotten used to people looking at her like she was something they didn't understand. "I wanted to check on you," he said. "I know this is a big change, and I want to make sure you're comfortable here. You don't have to stay if you don't want to, but I hope you'll give this a chance. I think you have a lot of potential, and I want to help you realize that potential." Emily looked at him for a moment. His words were kind, but they also made her nervous. She didn't know if she was ready for this kind of responsibility. She had spent so many years just surviving. She had never thought about a future beyond the next day or the next meal. She wasn't sure if she could be the kind of person Jonathan was talking about, the kind of person who deserved this kind of opportunity. She set the bowl down and looked at him. "Thank you," she said, "but I don't know if I'm ready for all of this. It feels like a dream." Jonathan nodded and smiled. "You don't have to have everything figured out right now," he said. "Take your time, but just know that I'm here to help you. I'm not asking for anything in return, just a chance to see you succeed." For a moment, Emily just stared at him, her heart full of conflicting emotions. She felt grateful, but she also felt terrified of failing, terrified of messing up what had been given to her. But she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't go back to the way things were. She couldn't go back to living on the streets. She had a chance now, a real chance to build a better life, and she had to take it. She nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. I'll give it a chance." Jonathan smiled and stood up. "Thank you," he said. "I know this won't be easy, but I believe in you." As he left the room, Emily sat there for a moment, thinking about everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. It was hard to wrap her mind around it all, but she knew that this was a turning point in her life, a moment that could change everything. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had a future after all. Days passed, and Emily found herself slowly adjusting to life in the mansion. The days were filled with small tasks and new experiences. She helped around the house, learning the ways of the people who lived there, learning what it was like to live in a place where warmth and kindness were just part of the day-to-day life. She had never known anything like it. She had spent so many years struggling to survive on the streets that she didn't know how to act in a place like this. She felt awkward at times, unsure of what was expected of her. She was so used to being invisible, to blending into the background. But here she was noticed, and for the first time in a long time, she wasn't sure she liked the attention. But Jonathan was patient with her. He didn't rush her. He let her take things at her own pace. He never pushed her to do more than she was comfortable with, and she appreciated that he treated her like an equal, not someone who needed saving, but someone who had potential, someone who could contribute. Every day she learned more about the mansion and about Jonathan's life. He told her about the work he did, the people he knew, and the company he ran. He had built his empire from the ground up, and he was proud of what he had accomplished. But there was always something about him that seemed lonely despite the wealth and success he had achieved. He didn't seem to find peace in it. He didn't seem happy even with everything he had. Emily wondered about that sometimes as she watched him from a distance. She could see the weight he carried in his eyes, and it made her wonder if he was looking for something beyond money, something more meaningful. One evening, after a long day of work, Emily found herself standing in the garden, gazing at the moon. The cool night air felt refreshing against her skin, and for a moment she allowed herself to breathe deeply. She had gotten used to the feeling of being safe in the mansion, but there was still something deep inside of her that felt unsettled, like she wasn't quite sure where she fit in this new world. She missed the freedom of the streets. Sometimes the feeling of being able to go wherever she wanted, even though the streets were dangerous. She had known them, and they had known her, but now she was in a place where she didn't know the rules, and it was both comforting and unsettling at the same time. She heard footsteps approaching, and turned to see Jonathan walking toward her. He was dressed casually for once, not in his usual business attire, but in a simple shirt and jeans. He smiled when he saw her standing there alone in the garden. "It's a beautiful night," he said, joining her by the garden bench. Emily smiled a little yet as she replied. Jonathan looked up at the sky, and then back at her. "You seem a little distant," he said. "Are you okay?" Emily hesitated for a moment. She didn't want to burden him with her doubts, but she also couldn't lie. She wasn't sure what was going on inside her head. "I don't know," she said quietly. I don't know if I belong here sometimes. I'm not used to this life. It feels like I'm pretending to be someone I'm not." Jonathan nodded, understanding. He had always been good at reading people, and he could see that Emily was struggling with more than just a change in her environment. He could see the conflict in her eyes, the uncertainty that weighed on her shoulders. "You don't have to pretend," Jonathan said softly. "You don't have to be anyone other than who you are here. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm just asking you to be yourself, and I believe that's enough." Emily looked at him, surprised by his words. She hadn't expected him to understand how she felt, but in that moment it felt like he saw her for who she really was, not the homeless girl who had found a wall on the street, but a person with dreams and fears just like anyone else. She looked away for a moment, feeling the weight of her emotions rise up inside her, but she didn't let herself cry, not yet. She wasn't ready to let go of the walls she had built around herself, not yet. "Thank you," she said softly. "I just don't know how to stop feeling like I don't deserve this sometimes." "You deserve it more than you think," Jonathan said, his voice gentle. "You deserve this because you have a heart of gold, and you didn't take the easy way out. You chose honesty over greed, and that's something rare. It's something valuable." Emily didn't know how to respond to that. She had never thought of herself as someone special. She had never thought of her actions as anything more than the right thing to do, but Jonathan seemed to see something in her that she didn't see in herself, and that made her feel something she had never felt before: hope. Maybe she could belong here. Maybe this new life could be something real. Maybe she could be someone who didn't just survive, but thrived. But even as she felt the spark of hope inside her, she knew she wasn't there, yet she knew she had a long way to go, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for the journey. But as she stood there in the garden with Jonathan by her side, she couldn't help but feel that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new, something better than anything she had ever known. The days passed quickly for Emily as she settled into her new life at the mansion, but each day was filled with its own set of challenges and moments of uncertainty. She found herself becoming more comfortable in the mansion and with Jonathan, but the nagging feeling that she didn't belong lingered in the back of her mind. She still wasn't used to being treated with kindness and respect. It felt strange to be cared for when all she had ever known was neglect and survival. She spent her days helping around the house, organizing the rooms, and learning how the mansion operated. She worked with the staff and began to understand how the household ran. She felt like she was finding her place in the world, but every now and then, when she would look around at the grand rooms and hear the laughter of the other people in the mansion, she couldn't help but wonder if she truly belonged there. One evening after dinner, Jonathan invited her to join him for a walk through the garden. He had been busy all day working on the business, but he always made time to check on Emily, to make sure she was okay, to talk to her about her progress and how she was adjusting to life in the mansion. The evening was cool and peaceful. The sky had darkened, and the stars were starting to show. Emily felt the tension in her shoulders ease as she walked alongside Jonathan, her thoughts still racing, but the calm of the night was soothing. Jonathan had been kind to her since she had arrived. He had given her a chance when no one else would, and for that she was grateful, but still there were moments when she felt like a stranger in this new world, moments when she wondered if Jonathan truly understood who she was, what she had been through. As they walked through the garden, Jonathan spoke about his plans for the future for his business and for the projects he was working on, but Emily wasn't really listening. She was lost in her own thoughts. The flowers around them swayed gently in the breeze, the moonlight casting soft shadows on the path they walked. "You seem distracted," Jonathan said, breaking the silence. "Are you okay?" Emily paused and turned to face him. "I don't know," she said quietly. "I just keep thinking about everything and how I don't fit in here sometimes." Jonathan stopped and looked at her for a moment. "I know it's a lot to adjust," he said, "but you're doing well, more than what you've shown a lot of strength since you've arrived here." Emily shook her head. "I don't feel strong," she said. "I feel lost. I don't know how to be the person you want to be or how to fit into this world. It's like I'm pretending. And I'm afraid that one day you'll see me for who I really am, a girl who's just trying to survive, not someone who belongs in a place like this." Jonathan looked at her with understanding in his eyes. "You don't have to pretend to be someone you're not." He said, "You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be you, and that's more than enough." "I'm not used to people telling me that," Emily said, her voice trembling. "I've always had to fight for everything I've ever had, and I've never known what it's like to be given something without having to earn it. I don't know how to accept kindness without feeling like I'm taking advantage of it." Jonathan took a deep breath and stepped closer to her. "You're not taking advantage of anything." He said, "You're learning to accept kindness, and you're learning that you're worthy of it. But it's okay to take time with that. It's okay to be unsure. But know that you have a place here, and you have a future here. I want to help you create that future." Emily felt the tears welling up inside her, but she didn't let them fall, not. Yet she was scared of what it meant to let someone, to trust someone with her heart. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could see a path ahead of her, a path that wasn't full of darkness and fear, but full of light and hope. "I don't know if I'm ready," she said quietly, "but I want to try. I want to believe that things can be different." Jonathan smiled softly. "You don't have to be ready right now," he said. "We'll take it one step at a time together." For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily felt a weight lift off her shoulders. It wasn't that everything was suddenly perfect, but for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe she could have something more than just survival. She could have a future, a real future. As they continued walking to the garden, the stars shining above them, Emily realized that she wasn't alone in this journey. Jonathan was there to help her, guide her, and offer her the support she needed. And with his help, maybe she could finally begin to believe in herself. They reached the edge of the garden, and Jonathan turned to her. "Before you go," he said, "I want to ask you something." Emily looked at him curiously. "What is it?" "I want you to think about what you want for yourself," he said. "Don't think about what I want or what anyone else wants. Just think about what you want for your future. What do you see when you imagine your life 5 years from now, 10 years from now?" Emily thought for a moment and then spoke. "Quietly, I want to be someone who's proud of herself, someone who doesn't have to hide anymore, someone who can look at herself and say, 'I did this, I made it.'" Jonathan nodded. "At a beautiful vision," he said, "and it's completely within your reach, but you have to believe it first, and I believe in you." Emily felt a surge of warmth in her chest. She hadn't expected to hear those words, not from someone like Jonathan, someone who had so much, but now she understood that he didn't see her for her past. He saw her for who she could become, and that made all the difference in the world. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for believing in me." "You don't need to thank me," Jonathan said with a smile. "Just keep believing in yourself, and we'll see where this journey takes you." And with that, Emily walked back to the mansion, feeling a little lighter than she had before. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like it could be something good. The next few weeks were a blur for Emily. Each day felt like a new beginning and a new challenge, but with each passing day, she felt herself becoming stronger. She worked hard at her new tasks around the mansion and began to learn new things she had never even thought about before, like how to manage a household or how to interact with people in a way that felt natural. She started to gain confidence in herself little by little, and every time Jonathan checked in on her, he reassured her that she was doing well. He never pressured her. He never expected perfection, but instead, he gave her the space she needed to find her own way, and that made all the difference. One morning, as she was helping the housekeeper prepare breakfast, Emily was surprised when Jonathan appeared in the kitchen. He was dressed in his usual sharp clothes, but there was a warmth in his expression that caught her off guard. "Good morning," he said with a smile. "I need to talk to you for a moment." Emily stopped what she was doing and turned to face him. Is everything okay? She asked, wondering if she had done something wrong. Jonathan nodded. Everything's fine. He said, I just want to let you know that I've been thinking a lot about your future here. I know it's still early, but I want to make sure you're on the right path and have the opportunity to do whatever it is you want with your life. Emily felt her heart race. She had been so focused on just getting by day that she hadn't thought much about her long-term goals. But hearing Jonathan's words made her realize that she could have a future beyond this mansion, beyond just surviving. She could build something real, something that was hers. What do you mean? She asked hesitantly. I mean that I want to offer you something more than just a place to stay and a job, Jonathan said. I want to give you the chance to learn and grow in a way that can help you achieve your dreams. I want you to think about what you truly want to do with your life and how I can help you get there. Emily was speechless. She had never been given this kind of opportunity. Before, no one had ever asked her what she wanted or what her dreams were. They had always told her what she needed to do to survive. But here was Jonathan offering her a chance to live a life she had only ever dreamed about. I don't even know where to start, she said, her voice soft and unsure. That's okay, Jonathan said with a reassuring smile. You don't have to have it all figured out right now. Just think about it. And when you're ready, we can work together to make it happen. Emily nodded slowly as she processed what Jonathan had said. She felt overwhelmed, but also excited. She had never considered a future for herself beyond the struggles of the streets. But now she had a chance to do something more. She could finally have a life where she wasn't just surviving, but thriving. As the days went by, Emily spent more time thinking about what she wanted for her future. She thought about the skills she had learned in the mansion and how she could apply them to something that mattered to her. She thought about the things that had always interested her, but she had never pursued because she thought they were out of reach. She thought about helping others the way Jonathan had helped her. She had always wanted to make a difference in the world, but had never known how she could do it. But now she saw a way forward. She could help people who were struggling. Just like she had struggled, she could offer them the same kindness and hope that Jonathan had given her. One afternoon, as she was walking through the garden, lost in thought, Jonathan found her again. This time, he wasn't just checking in on her. He had something else in mind. I've been thinking, he said, and I'd like to offer you a chance to take on more responsibility here if you feel ready. Emily looked up at him. Confused. More responsibility, she repeated. Yes, Jonathan said. I think you've learned a lot in a short amount of time, and I believe you have the ability to take on a bigger role in the household. If you're willing to try it, I think you have a lot to offer, and I want to give you the chance to prove it to yourself. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure if she was ready for more responsibility, but at the same time, she felt a surge of excitement. She had spent so many years trying to survive, trying to stay hidden, that the idea of actually being needed in a place like this felt overwhelming in the best way possible. I'll try, she said, her voice trembling with both nerves and excitement. I'm glad to hear that, Jonathan said, smiling. You're going to do great things, Emily. I believe in you. For the first time in her life, Emily truly believed that she could do something more than just survive. She could make a difference. She could build a life for herself and for others too. The days that followed were filled with new tasks and challenges, but Emily faced them with a new sense of determination. She worked harder than ever before, learning everything she could about the responsibilities Jonathan had given her, and applied herself with a focus she had never known. As the weeks turned into months, Emily found herself growing more confident in her role at the mansion and more certain about her future. She realized that the road ahead of her wasn't easy, but it was worth it. She had been given a chance, and she was going to take it. And as she continued to work alongside Jonathan and the other staff, she began to see herself in a new light. She was no longer the homeless girl who had nothing. She was a woman with purpose, with a future, and with the strength to build something great. And for the first time in years, Emily felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The weeks turned into months, and Emily found herself adapting more and more to her new life in the mansion. The walls that had once felt like barriers now seemed like the foundation of a new life. She was building brick by brick. With every task she completed, with every moment she spent learning and growing, she felt herself becoming a different person, a better version of the girl who had once walked the streets with nothing but hoped that things might get better. Jonathan had given her the chance to prove herself, and she worked hard every day to show him that he hadn't made a mistake by trusting her and offering her a place in his world. But there was one thing that Emily couldn't shake, no matter how much she tried to push it to the back of her mind, a question that had haunted her from the beginning. Why had Jonathan chosen her? What made her different from anyone else on the street? She didn't feel like anything special. She didn't feel like she deserved the kindness he had shown her. She was just a girl who had done the right thing by returning a wallet. And yet here she was living in a mansion with all the luxuries she could never have imagined, but why her? She was still working on her duties around the house when one day Jonathan asked to speak with her privately. He had been busy with work, but he always made time to check in with her. And today he seemed more serious than usual. Emily followed him into his office and sat down across from him. Her heart was already racing. She didn't know what this conversation was going to be about, but she had a feeling it was important. Jonathan sat down across from her and looked at her with a serious expression. "It's time for you to take the next step," he said. "The next step," Emily repeated, confused. "What do you mean?" Jonathan leaned forward slightly. "I believe you're ready for more responsibility. I've been watching you closely for the past few months, and I can see how much you've grown, but there's something else. I want to offer you something that will truly test your character." Emily blinked. "What kind of test?" she asked, her voice a little shaky. "A test of leadership," Jonathan said. "I want you to manage the staff here at the mansion. I want you to take on a role of overseeing everything that happens inside and outside the house. You'll be in charge of the day-to-day operations, managing staff, and making sure everything runs smoothly." Emily was taken aback. The idea of managing the mansion staff was something she had never imagined for herself. She had spent so many years trying to stay out of sight, trying to stay unnoticed. And now here was Jonathan offering her the chance to lead, to take charge of something so important. But the thought of it scared her. She had never led anyone before. She had never been in charge of anything in her life. What if she messed up? What if she wasn't good enough? "I'm not sure I can do it," she said quietly. "I don't know if I'm ready for something like that." Jonathan smiled gently. "I believe you're ready," he said. "You've shown incredible strength and determination since you've arrived here, and I trust you do the job. But I want you to understand this. It won't be easy. There will be challenges and moments where you will feel like giving up, but that's when your true character will shine. That's when you'll prove to yourself that you can rise above any obstacle." Emily looked at him, unsure what to say, but deep inside she knew that this was the test. She had been waiting for the opportunity to prove herself, not to Jonathan, not to anyone else, but to herself. She had been given a chance to show that she was capable of more than just surviving, that she was capable of leading. "I'll do it," she said quietly. Jonathan's eyes softened. "I knew you would," he said, standing up and offering his hand. Emily took it and stood up with him. "This is your moment, Emily, and I have no doubt that you'll succeed." As the days passed, Emily began to take on the new responsibilities Jonathan had given her. She worked alongside the staff, managing the tasks and making sure everything was in order. She quickly realized how much went into running a place like this, how much attention to detail was required, how much effort it took to make sure everything ran smoothly. But despite the challenges she faced, she pushed through, she kept going, and every day she became more confident in her abilities. The staff respected her and listened to her. They could see the change in her too. They saw how much she had grown, how much she cared about the mansion and about the people who worked there. Emily didn't just see herself as someone who was given a place to stay. She saw herself as part of the family, as someone who could contribute and make a real difference. But as time went on, Emily still couldn't shake the feeling that she was being tested, that there was something more to this than just managing the house, something that would reveal her true character. One afternoon, as she was walking to the halls of the mansion, she overheard a conversation between two of the staff members. They were talking about her, and at first she didn't pay much attention, but then she heard something that stopped her in her tracks. One of them was saying how they didn't believe Emily was really fit to manage the mansion, how they thought she was too inexperienced and didn't have the skills to lead the team. Emily felt her stomach drop. She had heard rumors about her before, but hearing it straight from the staff made it real, made her wonder if they were right, if she truly wasn't ready for this role. She stood there frozen for a moment, unsure what to do. She didn't want to confront the staff about it, but she also didn't want to let this doubt linger. She had worked too hard to let all fall apart because of a few whispers. She took a deep breath and walked back to her office where Jonathan was waiting for her. As soon as she entered, he could see that something was wrong. "What's going on, Emily?" he asked, noticing the look on her face. "I overheard a conversation," she said, her voice tight from the staff. "Don't believe I'm fit for the job. They think I'm too inexperienced. They think I can't lead." Jonathan's expression softened. "I'm sorry you had to hear that," he said, "but I want you to know this. They don't see what I see. They don't see how far you've come, how much you've grown. They don't understand what it takes to be a leader, and that's okay, because you're not doing this for them. You're doing this for yourself." Emily looked at him, unsure of how to respond. "You're doing great, Emily," Jonathan said. "You've earned this role, and you've earned the respect of everyone who's working with you. Just don't let anyone's opinion stop you from being the leader you were meant to be. And for the first time, Emily felt the weight of her doubt begin to lift. She had always been afraid of what others thought of her, but she realized that what mattered most was how she saw herself and how much she believed in her own potential. She nodded slowly. "You're right." She said softly, "I'm doing this for me." Jonathan smiled and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've got this, Emily. I know you do." And in that moment, Emily knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them. She was ready to prove to herself that she could be more than just a survivor. She could be a leader, someone who could make a difference. As the days turned into weeks, Emily felt herself growing more comfortable in her new role. She managed a mansion with a sense of purpose she had never known before. She worked with the staff, ensuring that everything was running smoothly and that the house was in perfect order. But it wasn't just the physical work that was changing her. It was the internal shift, the way she was beginning to see herself as someone capable of greatness, someone who wasn't just here because of a mistake or a chance encounter, but because she had earned her place. Jonathan continued to support her every step of the way. He checked in on her often, offering advice when needed and reminding her that she had the ability to handle whatever came her way. His belief in her was unwavering. And as time went on, Emily began to believe in herself a little more each day. But despite all the progress she had made, there were still moments when the doubts crept back, in moments when she questioned whether she truly belonged in this world, a world of wealth and opportunity, a world so far removed from the life she had known. One evening, after a long day of work, Jonathan invited Emily to join him for dinner. He had made a point of spending time with her outside of their usual business, and she appreciated it more than she could say. She had grown fond of him, not just as an employer, but as a mentor, someone who had taken the time to show her that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. The dining room was beautifully set with candles on the table and a warm glow from the fireplace. The meal was simple but elegant, and Emily felt a sense of calm as she sat down to eat. She hadn't realized how much she had missed sharing a meal with someone, how much she had missed feeling like she was a part of something bigger than herself. As they ate, Jonathan asked her about her thoughts on her progress, what she had learned, and where she saw herself going in the future. Emily was hesitant at first, unsure what to say, but as she spoke, she found herself opening up in a way she hadn't before. She talked about the fears. She still held on to the doubts that lingered in the back of her mind, but she also spoke about the hope she had found in this new life, the way she had come to believe that she could truly change her future. Jonathan listened attentively, his eyes never leaving her as she spoke. He nodded in understanding, and when she finished, he set his fork down and looked at her with a serious expression. "Emily," he said softly, "I know you still have doubts, but I want you to know that you've come so far, and that I see something in you that is rare. I see someone who isn't just going through the motions, but someone who is taking responsibility for their future, and that's something that most people can't say." Emily felt a lump form in her throat at his words. She had never been told anything like that before. She had always been told she wasn't good enough, that she would never amount to anything. But Jonathan saw something different in her. He saw potential, and that made all the difference. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jonathan smiled. "It's not just me who believes in you." He said, "Everyone who works here sees the effort you've put in. They see the way you've turned things around, and they respect you for it." Emily blinked, surprised by his words. She had always been so focused on her own doubts that she hadn't noticed the way the staff had begun to treat her with more respect. She had always felt like an outsider in this world, but now she was beginning to see that she wasn't as out of place as she had once thought. "You've earned it," Jonathan continued. "You've proven yourself to everyone here, but more importantly, you've proven yourself to yourself." Emily didn't know what to say to that. She had spent so much of her life fighting to survive that she had never stopped to think about what it meant to thrive. But now she was starting to understand that thriving wasn't just about surviving. It was about growing and becoming the person you were meant to be. As they finished dinner, Jonathan stood up and walked over to the window. The sky outside was dark, but the stars shone brightly above them. "It's a beautiful night," he said, his voice soft and contemplative. Emily joined him at the window, looking out at the night sky. "It is," she agreed. Jonathan turned to her and looked at her seriously. "I want you to know that this is just a beginning for you, Emily. Everything you've done so far is just a stepping stone to something even greater. You have the ability to achieve anything you set your mind to, and I believe in you with all my heart." For the first time in a long time, Emily felt a surge of confidence rise inside her. She had spent so much time doubting herself, questioning her worth. But in that moment, she realized that she had come so far and that she had the power to go even further. Thank you, she said again, her voice full of gratitude and newfound strength. I won't let you down. I know you won't, Jonathan said with a smile. I have no doubt that you'll do amazing things. The night passed in a comfortable silence as Emily and Jonathan sat in the warmth of the fire. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, Emily felt ready to face it with courage and hope in her heart. She knew that the road ahead would be full of challenges, but she also knew that she was no longer alone. She had a future, now a future, she could shape and create with her own hands. And for the first time in years, Emily felt like she was finally in control of her destiny. Emily continued to work hard in her role at the mansion. She had settled into her responsibilities, and it started to feel like she truly belonged. She wasn't just a visitor in this new world. She had become a part of every task she completed, every decision she made felt like another step forward toward the future she was building for herself. But even as she settled into her new life, there was still something that she couldn't quite shake, something that lingered in the back of her mind, the question of who Jonathan really was. She had gotten to know him as a mentor, as a kind and generous man who had given her a chance when no one else would, but despite the warmth he showed her, she couldn't help but feel like there was something more to him, something that he wasn't sharing with her. She knew there were parts of his life he kept hidden behind his calm, exterior parts of his past that he didn't talk about, and she wondered if it was something she would ever understand. One evening after dinner, as the staff cleaned up, Jonathan invited Emily to join him for a walk through the garden. She had been working long hours, and she had grown used to their evening walks together. It had become a routine for them, something that allowed them to talk about life away from the formalities of the mansion. They walked side by side to the garden. The night air was cool, and the moon hung high in the sky, casting a soft light over flowers and trees. Everything around them was calm, peaceful, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Jonathan had been unusually quiet that evening, and Emily could sense that there was something weighing on him. She had gotten used to the way he carried himself with quiet confidence, but tonight he seemed different. "Jonathan," she said, breaking the silence, "are you okay?" He looked at her for a moment as if considering whether or not to answer a question. Then he sighed and slowed his pace. He stopped by a bench and sat down with a heavy sigh. Emily sat down next to him and waited for him to speak. "It's just been a long day," he said. "Finally, I've been dealing with some things at work, and I'm afraid it's starting to catch up with me." Emily turned to him curiously. "What kind of things?" she asked. Jonathan hesitated, as if unsure of how to explain the weight he was carrying. "There's a lot about my past that I've never shared," he said quietly, "things I've never wanted to talk about, not because I'm ashamed of them, but because they're things I've tried to move past, things I thought I could leave behind." Emily sat quietly listening, waiting for him to continue. Jonathan took a deep breath and continued. "When I first started my business, I was young and naive. I thought I could build an empire without losing sight of what mattered most. I thought I could have it all and still keep my integrity. But the truth is, it's not that simple. The higher you climb, the more compromises you have to make, and the harder it becomes to stay true to your values." He paused and looked at the ground for a moment. Then he looked up at Emily with a sad smile. "I've made mistakes along the way, mistakes I can't undo, and they still haunt me sometimes," he said. Emily didn't know what to say. She could hear the pain in his voice, and for the first time she saw him not as a successful businessman, but as a man carrying a heavy burden. "You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to," she said gently, "but if you ever do, I'm here to listen." Jonathan smiled at her gratefully. "Thank you," he said. "I appreciate that more than you know." They sat in silence for a moment, both lost in their thoughts. The soft rustling of the leaves and breeze was the only sound between them. Emily could feel the weight of his words, and it made her wonder how much of the man he had become was shaped by the secrets he kept, the mistakes he carried. Finally, Jonathan stood up and looked at her. "I'm not ready to share everything with you yet," he said, "but I want you to know that you're not alone in this journey, and that I see in you the same qualities that helped me get to where I am today, the drive to keep going even when the road gets tough, the belief that things can get better." Emily stood up and followed him as they continued their walk through the garden. She didn't push him for more details. She didn't need to know everything right away. She knew that Jonathan had his own demons to face, just like everyone else, and maybe one day he would be ready to share them with her. But for now, she was content with a quiet understanding between them. As they walked, Emily couldn't help but think about the secrets people kept, and the way those secrets shaped them. She knew all too well what it was like to carry the weight of the past, to carry things that you couldn't undo. But she also knew that the past didn't have to define you. It didn't have to control your future. The rest of the evening was quiet and peaceful. They returned to the mansion and parted ways as they always did, but something had changed between them. Emily could sense that Jonathan was still carrying the weight of his past, but she also saw something else, a man who was trying to make up for his mistakes, a man who was doing the best he could with the knowledge and experience he had gained along the way. She realized that she wasn't the only one who had been given a second chance. Maybe Jonathan had been given his too. Maybe this was his way of finding redemption by helping her and others who needed it. And maybe, just maybe, she could help him too. The days stretched into months, and Emily continued to grow into her role in the mansion. But there were still moments when the past seemed to come rushing back at her like an unstoppable tide. She had come so far, but sometimes in the quiet of the night, she would find herself lost in memories of the streets, memories of the night spent cold and alone, the fear of never knowing where her next meal would come from. But each day she woke up to a new beginning. The mansion had become a place of refuge for her, a place where the past didn't have to define her future. Jonathan's belief in her had become a driving force, propelling her forward even when she doubted herself. He had shown her that there was more to life than just surviving. There was living, truly living, and for the first time, Emily was beginning to understand what that meant. She had learned so much about herself in the time she had spent at the mansion, about her own strength, her resilience, her capacity to love and trust again. And yet, there were still moments when she questioned her worth, when she wondered if this life was truly meant for her. But each day, she found herself taking one step further away from the girl she had been, one step closer to the woman she was becoming. She had made peace with the fact that she wasn't perfect, and that her past didn't need to be something she hid anymore. It was a part of her, but it didn't have to define her. One afternoon, Jonathan sat with her in the sitting room, the soft light streaming through the windows casting a peaceful glow on the room. He had been quieter than usual lately, and Emily could sense that something was weighing on him. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice soft and concerned. Jonathan looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking a lot about you lately," he said, "about your future, and how far you've come." Emily wasn't sure where this was going, but she felt a knot form in her stomach. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been watching you," Jonathan continued, "and I've seen you change in ways that are incredible. You've come so far from the girl who found my wallet on the street. You're not just surviving anymore, Emily. You're thriving." Emily's heart skipped a beat at his words. It had been a long time since anyone had spoken to her like this, as if she was someone who mattered, as if she was more than just an afterthought. "But there's something I want to ask you," Jonathan said, his voice gentle. "Anything," she replied, her voice filled with uncertainty. "I want you to consider stepping into a bigger role," he said, his gaze steady. "Not just here in the mansion, but in my company. I think you have the potential to be more than just someone managing the staff. I think you could be someone who leads, who makes decisions, who helps others see the way forward. I believe in you that much." Emily blinked, stunned by his words. She had never imagined herself in a role like that, never thought she would be trusted with such responsibility. She had always been a girl who lived on the edge, who kept her head down, who just tried to survive. But here Jonathan was, asking her to believe in herself, asking her to see what he saw in her. "I don't know if I can," she said, her voice shaky. "I don't know if I'm ready for something like that." Jonathan smiled, his eyes filled with warmth and understanding. "You've already proven that you are," he said. "You've already shown that you have the heart and the mind for it. I wouldn't ask you if I didn't believe you could do it." Emily's mind raced. The offer was both exhilarating and terrifying. For so long, she felt like an outsider, like she didn't belong in a world like this. But now, Jonathan was offering her a chance to be part of something bigger than herself, to lead, to make a difference. What would it be like to actually believe in herself? What would it be like to step into her own future with confidence, without fear, without the weight of the past holding her back? "I'll do it," she said finally, her voice steady and sure. "I'll try." Jonathan's smile widened. "I knew you would." In the days that followed, Emily began to prepare for her new role. Jonathan spent time with her, teaching her about the business, about the decisions she would need to make, and the responsibilities she would have. Emily listened intently, absorbing everything he shared with her. She realized that there was so much she didn't know, so much she had yet to learn. But she also realized that she was capable of learning, of growing, of becoming the person she had always dreamed of being. Her life was no longer just about surviving. It was about living, about moving forward, about creating a future that she could be proud of. And as she looked at Jonathan, she saw not just a mentor, but someone who had given her the greatest gift anyone could give, to believe in her potential and to help her see that her future wasn't written by her past. She wasn't just a homeless girl anymore. She was a woman with a future, with dreams, with the ability to make those dreams come true. And that was a gift she would never take for granted. The weeks that followed were some of the most challenging Emily had ever faced, but they were also the most transformative. As she stepped into the new role Jonathan had offered her, she was faced with a flood of responsibilities that at times felt overwhelming. Every decision she made seemed to carry weight. Every task felt like a test of her ability to lead and manage. But despite the pressure, Emily pushed forward, determined to prove to herself that she could do this. Jonathan remained by her side, offering guidance and support whenever she needed it. His belief in her never wavered, and it gave her the strength to keep going, even when she wasn't sure she could. But as with any journey of growth, there were moments of doubt, moments when Emily questioned if she was truly cut out for this role. The mansion staff, though respectful, still looked at her with skepticism at times, especially the ones who had been there for years. They hadn't fully accepted her as a leader yet, and the whispers behind her back didn't go unnoticed. Emily was used to the way people doubted her, but it still hurt to feel like she wasn't fully accepted by the people she was working alongside. One particularly challenging day, Emily had to make a difficult decision about the staff schedule, a decision that would affect their work hours and pay. The task itself was a simple one, but it was her first real test of authority, and she knew that no matter what she decided, someone would be unhappy. As she sat in Jonathan's office, reviewing the details, she felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. When Jonathan entered the room, he could see the tension in her eyes. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice gentle. Emily looked up at him, her hands resting on the papers in front of her. "I have to make a decision, but it's not easy. No matter what I choose, someone will be upset. I don't want to cause conflict, but I also don't want to make a decision that's unfair. I just don't know if I can handle the pressure." Jonathan sat down across from her, studying her carefully. "You're not going to make everyone happy," he said. "That's the reality of being a leader. But what you can do is make the best decision with the information you have. You're here because I trust you to make those decisions. You don't have to have all the answers, but you do have to trust yourself." Emily nodded slowly, feeling the weight of his words sink in. She had always been afraid of making the wrong choice, but maybe that fear was holding her back. She had spent so many years running from the consequences of her decisions, hiding from the possibility of failure. But now, she realized running wasn't an option anymore. She had to stand up and face the challenges head on, no matter how difficult they seemed. "I'll make the decision," she said quietly. "I'll trust myself." "That's all I'm asking," Jonathan said, smiling. "You've got this." After their conversation, Emily returned to the task at hand. She made the decision, knowing it wouldn't please everyone, but it was the right one. She gathered the staff and explained her reasoning, standing tall and speaking with confidence. There were murmurs of discontent, but no one openly challenged her. Emily realized for the first time that it wasn't the decision itself that mattered most. It was how she handled the challenge, how she stood firm in the face of adversity. That made the real difference. The next few days were tough. There were subtle tensions between Emily and the staff, and the whispers continued behind her back. But as the days passed, something began to shift. Slowly, the staff began to respect her more. They saw the effort she was putting in, the way she cared about their well-being, and the responsibility she took in making the difficult decisions. They could see that she wasn't just a girl who had stumbled into this life. She was a leader, someone who had earned her place. One evening, as Emily was finishing up her work for the day, Jonathan came to check on her, as he often did. "You're doing well," he said, his voice warm and reassuring. "Thank you," she replied. "It's not easy, but I'm starting to feel like I'm getting the hang of it." Jonathan smiled. That's the thing about leadership, he said. It's not about being perfect. It's about pushing through the hard times, learning from your mistakes, and growing stronger because of them. Emily thought about his words as she walked through the mansion that evening. She had faced so many storms, doubts about herself, doubts from others, the weight of decisions and the fear of failure. But with every storm, there had been a sunrise. Every challenge had brought her closer to understanding who she really was and what she was capable of. And for the first time in a long time, Emily felt a flicker of hope inside her that this journey, difficult as it had been, was worth it. She wasn't the same girl who wandered the streets, with nothing but a few dollars in her pocket and a dream that seemed too far away to reach. She was someone different now. She was a woman who could make decisions, who could lead, who could make a difference. And with each new day, she found herself moving closer to the person she had always wanted to become. As Emily stood by the large windows of the mansion, looking out over the sprawling garden, she couldn't help but feel a sense of disbelief. It had been months since she first stepped foot into this world, a world so different from the one she had known. The mansion, the staff, the responsibilities, all of it still felt surreal to her, like a dream she hadn't quite woken up from. But the dream was becoming more real every day, and with it came the undeniable truth. She had a second chance at life, a chance to make something of herself, a chance to be someone she could be proud of. Her journey had been anything but easy. There had been days when the weight of her past threatened to drag her back into the shadows, days when the doubts whispered in her mind, telling her that she didn't belong in this world. But every time she doubted herself, she thought about the moments when Jonathan had believed in her, when he'd seen something in her that she hadn't seen in herself. And slowly, through hard work, determination, and the kindness of the people around her, she began to believe in herself too. Emily had faced her fair share of challenges, tensions with the staff, the pressure of making decisions, the fear of failure. But with each challenge, she grew stronger. She had learned that being a leader wasn't about being perfect. It was about being human, making mistakes, and learning from them. It was about standing tall even when you didn't have all the answers and finding the courage to move forward when the road ahead seemed uncertain. As the days passed, she became more confident in her role at the mansion. The staff, who had once questioned her abilities, now looked to her for guidance. She had earned their respect through her actions, through her commitment to doing what was right. And more importantly, she had earned her own respect. She knew that she was no longer the girl who had been lost in the streets. She was someone new, someone who had taken control of her life and was shaping her future with every decision she made. One afternoon, as Emily was finishing up a meeting with the staff, she was called into Jonathan's office. When she entered, she found him sitting at his desk, looking as calm and collected as ever. But there was something in his eyes, something that told her this wasn't just a casual check-in. "Please, have a seat," Jonathan said with gesture. Emily sat down across from him. Her curiosity piqued. "What's going on?" she asked. Jonathan smiled, but it was a thoughtful smile, one that seemed to carry more weight than usual. "I wanted to talk to you about something important," he said. "You've been with me for quite a while now, and I've watched you grow in ways that have truly amazed me. I know that when you first arrived here, you didn't see your potential, but I think you've started to realize it, and I couldn't be prouder of everything you've accomplished." Emily looked down at her hands, a little embarrassed by his praise, but a part of her couldn't help but feel proud of how far she'd come. She had worked so hard, pushed through every challenge, and now, sitting here, she could see the woman she was becoming. A woman who could stand on her own 2 feet, who could make decisions, who could lead. It was a long way from the girl who used to walk the streets, invisible to the world. Jonathan continued, his voice softer now. "You've made incredible progress, Emily, and I believe you've earned something special. I want to offer you a permanent position in the company. Not just as someone who runs a household, but as someone who will help with the business side of things. Someone who will work alongside me to grow the company, to help it become what we both know it can be." Emily's heart skipped a beat. This was more than she had ever expected. She had come to Mansion with nothing, unsure of what the future held. But now, Jonathan was offering her a chance to be part of something much bigger than herself. "I'm offering you a second chance," Jonathan said. "Not just at life, but at something that could truly make a difference." And I believe you have what it takes to succeed, to take the company to places we've only dreamed of. Emily felt the weight of his words, the truth in them. This wasn't just an opportunity. It was a turning point. She had been given a second chance at life. And now she was being given a chance to make her mark on the world, to contribute in ways she had never imagined. I don't know what to say, she whispered, her voice full of emotion. You don't have to say anything right now, Jonathan said with a smile. Take your time. Think it over. But know that I believe in you, and I'll support you every step of the way. Emily sat in silence for a moment, processing everything that had just been said. She had spent so many years wondering if she would ever have a future, if she would ever have a chance to make something of herself. And now, here she was, sitting in a mansion, being offered a role in a business that was thriving, being offered a chance to not just survive, but thrive. She looked at Jonathan, her heart full of gratitude. Thank you, she said softly, for everything. Jonathan nodded. You've earned it, Emily. You've worked harder than anyone else. And I know you're ready for this next step. The next few days were filled with a whirlwind of excitement as Emily began to transition into her new role. There were meetings to attend, plans to make, decisions to be discussed. But through it all, Emily felt a sense of purpose that she had never known before. This was more than just a job. This was a chance to prove to herself that she could do something big, something meaningful. And with each passing day, she felt herself becoming more confident in her abilities, more sure of her place in this new world. She wasn't just a homeless girl anymore. She was a woman with a future, with goals, with the power to shape her own destiny. The sun was setting one evening as Emily sat by the window in her office, looking out over the garden. For the first time in her life, she could see the path ahead clearly. She had been given a second chance, and she wasn't going to waste it. She was going to make the most of this opportunity. She was going to live a life she could be proud of, and she was going to help others along the way, just as Jonathan had helped her. The future was bright, and for the first time in a long time, Emily knew she was ready to face it head on. The days were moving faster now, and the change in Emily was undeniable. She had spent so many years wondering if she would ever amount to anything, but now, as she stood in front of her reflection, she barely recognized the woman staring back at her. Her once uncertain eyes were now filled with confidence. The posture that had been hunched from years of hardship now stood straight, with shoulders back and head held high. The mansion, which had once felt foreign to her, now felt like home. Every corner, every room, even the garden outside, held memories of her transformation. Jonathan had kept his promise to her, always pushing her forward, but never forcing her to move faster than she was ready. He had believed in her from the start, and now, Emily was starting to believe in herself. She had earned this life, she told herself. She had fought for it, worked hard for it, and finally, it felt like she was no longer just surviving. She was living. She was thriving. But despite all the progress she had made, there was still that gnawing question in the back of her mind. Was she truly ready for what was coming next? Jonathan had offered her a role not just managing the mansion, but becoming a key figure in the future of his business. He had entrusted her with his vision, believing she could help shape it, believing she had the vision to take it further. She couldn't help but feel the weight of it, the magnitude of what Jonathan had asked of her. She had always been the girl who lived day to day, never looking too far ahead, never believing that tomorrow would be any different from the day before. But now, she was being asked to think beyond her own survival, to think about the bigger picture, about how she could influence the future, not just of the mansion, but of an entire business empire. And the thought scared her more than she cared to admit. She had taken on leadership before, but this was different. This wasn't just managing a household or making decisions that affected a few people. This was a real business with real stakes. This was her opportunity to show the world, to show herself, that she wasn't just someone who had been lucky enough to stumble into a better life. She was someone who had the skills, the heart, and the mind to make things happen. Jonathan's voice broke her from her thoughts. He stood in the doorway, watching her with a quiet smile on his face. He had always been there in the background, guiding her without pushing her. He had given her space to find herself, to learn who she was without rushing her. Ready for your next challenge? he asked, his voice calm, steady, and full of the quiet confidence he always exuded. Emily smiled and nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. For the first time, she felt truly ready. She had faced every obstacle in her way. She had turned her past into a stepping stone, and now she was ready to take this next step. She was ready to make her name known, not just in the mansion, but in the world. She followed Jonathan into his office, where the final decision was waiting. She had spent weeks preparing, reviewing the business plans, meeting with the staff, understanding the complexities of the empire Jonathan had built. But today, it wasn't just about learning the ropes. Today was the day Emily had to prove that she could take her place as a key player in that empire. Jonathan sat behind his desk, his fingers steepled in front of him. He motioned for Emily to sit across from him, and she did, her nerves rising despite her earlier confidence. "You know what this means, right?" Jonathan asked, his tone serious but not unkind. "I think so," Emily replied, her voice steady but tinged with uncertainty. "I'm not just managing the mansion anymore. I'm taking on a bigger role, one that impacts the company, the future of everything you've built." Jonathan nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "This is your chance to take control of your future. Not just the mansion, but everything. Your decisions will affect more than just the people who work here. They'll affect the lives of so many others, the people we work with, the communities we impact." Emily took a deep breath. This was it, the moment that would define the rest of her journey. She could feel the weight of it all, the pressure, the responsibility. But she didn't shrink from it. Instead, she embraced it. This was her time. This was her opportunity to prove that she belonged, that she could be a force in this world. "What I'm asking you to do is more than just lead," Jonathan continued. "I'm asking you to believe in yourself, to trust in the journey we've started, and to know that you are capable of building something bigger than both of us. You're not just taking over a job. You're stepping into a vision, and that vision includes you fully, completely." Emily looked at him, feeling the truth of his words deep within her. She had spent so long thinking that her place in this world was limited by her past, by the things she had gone through. But Jonathan was showing her that her past wasn't a prison. It was a foundation that had prepared her for this very moment. "I'm ready," she said, her voice stronger now. "I won't let you down. I'll do everything I can to help this vision grow." Jonathan smiled, and for the first time, Emily saw a glint of pride in his eyes. "I know you will," he said softly. "That's why I'm giving you this chance. You've earned it." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity as Emily began to step fully into her new role. She spent long hours working with Jonathan, learning the ins and outs of business, meeting with key figures, and making decisions that would shape the company's future. There were moments when the pressure felt overwhelming, when the weight of responsibility almost seemed too much to bear. But in those moments, she reminded herself of how far she had come. She reminded herself of the strength she had found within herself, and of the people who believed in her. Most of all, Jonathan. And as the days turned into weeks, Emily began to see the changes she had hoped for. The staff responded to her leadership. The business flourished under her careful guidance, and the vision Jonathan had created started to take root in new and exciting ways. She wasn't just managing a mansion anymore. She was managing an empire. Her empire. And as her name started to be recognized, not just as Jonathan's assistant, but as a leader in her own right, Emily realized that this was just the beginning. The light that had once seemed so far away was now within reach. She wasn't just a part of someone else's world anymore. She was creating her own. And for the first time in her life, Emily felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. As Emily took her place in the business, the weight of her new responsibilities became clearer with each passing day. The world she had once only dreamed had opened up to her, and now, with each decision she made, she realized just how much impact she could have. The mansion, which had once been a sanctuary from the harshness of the streets, had transformed into the backdrop of her new life. It was no longer just a place of refuge. It was a place where she could shape the future. There were days when challenges felt too overwhelming, the pressure mounting on her from every side. The business meetings were long and tiring, and the decisions she had to make were often difficult. Some days, Emily would find herself sitting in her office, staring at the papers in front of her, wondering if she was truly cut out for this. But then she would think about where she had come from. The cold street corners, the nights spent wondering if she would make it through another day, and she would find the strength to move forward. She had faced harder battles, fought for every scrap of food, for every moment of safety, and now she was fighting for something greater, a future she could build with her own hands. As the weeks passed, Emily's presence in the company began to be felt by more than just the staff. She started to attend high-level meetings, working closely with Jonathan and the board members, helping shape the future of the business. Slowly, she earned the respect of those around her. She wasn't just Jonathan's assistant anymore. She was his partner, a key player in the company's success. But it wasn't just about business for Emily. She had come to realize that the most important part of this new life wasn't the wealth or the power. It was the ability to make a difference. She had seen how Jonathan had built his empire, but now it was her turn to contribute in her own way. She wanted to make sure that the people who worked for the company had the same opportunities she had been given. She wanted to help others who were struggling, just as Jonathan had helped her. One afternoon, as she sat in her office, reviewing a new business proposal, Jonathan came in with a small envelope in his hand. He looked at her with a smile, and Emily immediately felt the familiar sense of support she had come to rely on. "I've been meaning to give this to you," Jonathan said, handing her the envelope. Emily took it, curious. "What is it?" she asked. "Open it," Jonathan replied. She tore open the envelope, revealing a certificate inside. As she read it, her eyes widened in disbelief. The certificate was an official recognition of her position in the company, a formal acknowledgement that she was now not just part of the team, but an integral part of the leadership. It was a promotion, one that placed her on the same level as the other top executives in the company. She looked up at Jonathan, her heart racing. This is really happening, isn't it?" Jonathan smiled. "Yes, it is. You've earned this, Emily. You've worked harder than anyone I know, and now you're where you belong." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she looked at the certificate in her hands. She had spent so many years wondering if she would ever have a place in this world, wondering if she would ever be good enough. And now, here she was, standing at the very top, ready to help shape the future of a business that had once seemed so far out of reach. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "I never imagined this would be my life." Jonathan's smile grew wider. "You earned it. You're ready for this." The next few months were a blur of activity as Emily settled into her new role. The staff looked to her for guidance. The board members respected her decisions, and the business continued to grow under her leadership. But the real change, the real growth, was happening within Emily herself. She was no longer the girl who had struggled to survive on the streets. She was no longer the girl who had doubted her worth. She was a woman with a future, with dreams that were within her reach, and with the power to make those dreams come true. One evening, as she sat in her office, looking out over the city, Emily felt a sense of peace settle over her. The city lights twinkled in the distance, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she had a place in it. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was a leader, someone who had built her future with her own hands. The phone rang, breaking her from her thoughts. She answered it, her voice steady and confident. "Emily," Jonathan's voice came through the line. "We need to talk. There's a big project coming up, and I think you're the perfect person to take it on." She smiled, feeling the familiar rush of excitement. "What is it?" she asked. "It's a new initiative," Jonathan explained. "Something that will take the company to new heights. And I want you to lead it." For a moment, Emily sat in silence, the weight of what he was asking settling in. This was more than just another task. This was the next step, the opportunity to take everything she had learned and apply it to something bigger. This was her chance to make an even greater impact, to leave her mark on the company and on the world. Thank you so much for watching. We truly appreciate your time and support. If you enjoyed the video, please give a thumbs up, and don't forget to leave a meaningful comment below. Let us know your thoughts, and tell us where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. It means a lot to us to hear from you. If you're new to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more amazing content like this. And to all our returning subscribers, Thank you for your continued support. We couldn't do this without you. Stay tuned for more exciting videos coming your way, and we'll see you in the next one. I'm ready, she said, her voice full of certainty. Let's do it.